The Chicago O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the frenetic energy of a Monday morning. Travelers dragged suitcases. Announcements crackled over the intercom, and the scent of overpriced coffee hung in the air. Ethan Carter, a 42-year-old white American with sharp green eyes and a jawline that could cut glass, navigated the chaos with the precision of a man who thrived on control. His tailored navy suit, crisp and unwrinkled despite the early hour, marked him as someone who belonged in boardrooms, not baggage claims. As the CEO of Carter Industries, a tech empire he'd built from a college dorm room into a global powerhouse, Ethan's life was a tightly orchestrated symphony of deals, deadlines, and dominance. Today, he was en route to Tokyo for a merger that could redefine his company's future. His phone, pressed to his ear, relayed the voice of his CFO, Alan, mid-sentence about stock projections. "Alan, I don't care about the optics." Ethan cut in, and his tone was clipped and commanding. "If Tokyo doesn't sign by Wednesday, we walk. They need us more than we need them." He glanced at his sleek, understated watch that cost more than most people's cars and quickened his pace toward the first-class security line. His assistant, Lauren, trailed a step behind, her tablet glowing with schedules and emails. "Mr. Carter, your jet's on standby," she said, her voice steady despite the bustle. "Boarding's in 30 minutes. "Good," Ethan replied, barely acknowledging her. His focus was on the call, the numbers, and the power play unfolding across the Pacific. The airport's clamor, crying babies, rolling suitcases, hurried goodbyes, faded into white noise. Ethan Carter didn't notice people. People saw him. At 6'2", with dark hair starting to gray at the temples, he carried an aura of untouchable success. His life was his work, and he liked it that way. Relationships, hobbies, even vacations were distractions he'd long since discarded. 12 years ago, he'd let something slip away, and he hadn't looked back. Or so he told himself. Then, as if fate had other plans, his gaze snagged on a figure by a newsstand near Gate 17. A woman, her back to him, was flipping through a magazine. Her Black American heritage was evident in the rich tone of her skin and the elegant braid that fell just past her shoulders. She wore a simple olive green jacket and jeans, yet something about her posture, the way she tilted her head, struck a chord deep in Ethan's memory. His steps slowed, the phone call forgotten. "Alan, I'll call you back," he said abruptly, ending the call without waiting for a reply. Lauren glanced up, confused, but Ethan didn't notice. His heart, usually steady as a metronome, gave an unfamiliar lurch. It couldn't be her, not after all this time. But as the woman turned slightly, revealing a profile that hadn't changed in 12 years, Ethan's world tilted. Amara Johnson. His college love, his ex, the woman who'd walked out of his life without a backward glance. Her honey-brown eyes, now framed by faint laugh lines, scanned the crowd, unaware of him. She was still striking, her presence warm and grounded, making the airport's chaos seem trivial. Ethan's mind raced, memories flooding back. Late-night study sessions, her laughter, their final fight when he'd chosen a client meeting over her law school dreams. He'd buried those memories, convinced they belonged to a weaker version of himself. Yet here she was, real and impossibly close. He should keep walking. Tokyo was waiting, and the past was a closed book. But his feet betrayed him, carrying him toward her as if drawn by an invisible thread. Amara hadn't seen him yet. She was speaking to someone at her side, her voice soft but clear. Ethan's gaze dropped, and his breath caught. A boy, about 7, stood beside her, clutching a small backpack. His skin was a warm blend of Amara's rich brown and a lighter tone, His curly hair dark and tousled, but his eyes, piercing green, identical to Ethan's, stopped him cold. The boy was a mirror, a miniature reflection of Ethan's features, softened by childhood. He stared at Ethan with unguarded curiosity, as if sensing a connection. "Mom, who's that man?" the boy asked, tugging Amara's sleeve. She followed his gaze, and her expression froze when her eyes met Ethan's. The magazine slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and something more profound. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. Her hand tightened on the boy's shoulder, protective and instinctive. Ethan stood rooted, his usual eloquence gone. The airport's noise faded, leaving only the pounding of his pulse. The boy tilted his head, studying Ethan with those haunting green eyes. Then, in a clear and innocent voice, he said, "Dad?" The word was a thunderclap, shattering Ethan's carefully constructed world. His knees weakened, and for the first time in years, he felt unmoored, adrift in a reality he hadn't prepared for. Amara's face crumpled, her composure cracking. "Caleb, no," she said quickly, pulling the boy closer. But Caleb's eyes stayed on Ethan, hopeful and confused, as if a puzzle piece had clicked into place. Ethan found his voice, though it was rough, barely his own. "Amara, what? Is he—" He couldn't finish the question, but he didn't need to. Her silence, the way her gaze dropped, told him everything. Caleb was his son, a son he'd never known existed. Amara had left him 12 years ago, and now he understood why, or at least he was beginning to. The merger, the jet, the empire he'd built seemed trivial, dwarfed by the small boy staring at him with his own eyes. "Caleb, we need to go," Amara said, her voice trembling as she tried to steer the boy away. But Caleb resisted, his sneakers planted firmly. "Mom, he looks like me. Is he my dad?" The question hung in the air, raw and unanswerable in the moment. Ethan stepped closer, ignoring the travelers brushing past his flight's ticking clock. "Amara," he said, his tone low but firm. "We need to talk. Now." Her eyes flashed with defiance, then softened with resignation. "Not here, Ethan. Not like this." She glanced at Caleb, who was still watching them, his small face a mix of wonder and uncertainty. Ethan's mind spun, calculating, searching for control in a situation that defied it. He had a son. The words looped in his head, each repetition heavier than the last. He looked at Caleb, the boy who'd called him Dad, and felt something shift, a crack in the armor he'd worn for years. "Fine," Ethan said, forcing calm into his voice. "But we're not leaving this unresolved. Name a place, a time." Amara hesitated, her protective grip on Caleb unwavering. Then, as if making a decision she wasn't ready for, she nodded. "Tomorrow. Springfield, Lincoln Park, 3:00 p.m. It's where we live." She scribbled an address on a receipt and thrust it at him, her hand shaking. "Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be, Ethan." He took the paper, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. "I won't," he said, though he wasn't sure what he meant. As Amara led Caleb toward their gate, the boy glanced back, waving shyly. Ethan raised a hand. The gesture was automatic, but heavy with meaning. Lauren approached, her tablet still in hand. "Mr. Carter, we must move, or you'll miss the flight." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He watched Amara and Caleb disappear into the crowd, the boy's green eyes lingering in his mind. For the first time in his career, Tokyo could wait. He turned to Lauren, and his decision was made. "Cancel the flight," he said. "I'm staying." Ethan Carter stood rooted in the chaotic swirl of Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, his green eyes locked on the small boy who'd just called him Dad. The word echoed, sharp and disorienting, unraveling the controlled world he'd built as CEO of Carter Industries. Amara Johnson stood a few feet away, her honey-brown eyes wide with panic, her hand gripping Caleb's shoulder as if to anchor them both. His green eyes mirroring Ethan's. Caleb clutched a backpack, his curious gaze darting between his mother and the stranger who felt strangely familiar. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Lauren, his assistant, no doubt pressing him about the canceled Tokyo flight. But he ignored it, the weight of this moment drowning out everything else. "Amara," Ethan said, his voice rough, barely audible over the airport's clamor. "Is he my son?" The question hung heavy, a truth he felt in his bones but needed confirmed. Amara's silence was answer enough, her lips trembling as she nodded once, reluctant. "He's 7, she whispered, her voice barely carrying. "Born 9 months after I left." The math struck Ethan like a cold shock. 9 months after Amara had vanished, leaving a note that read, "I can't keep up with your world." His startup had consumed him then, chasing venture capital, sleeping in boardrooms. Her absence had stung, but he'd buried it under ambition. Now, the reality of a son, a boy with his eyes, her warmth, rewrote everything. "You were pregnant," he said, his voice low. "And you didn't tell me." Amara's eyes flashed defiantly, though her hand tightened on Caleb's shoulder. "Don't start, Ethan," she said, her tone sharp, but hushed to keep Caleb from hearing. "You are halfway across the globe, building your empire." I was an afterthought. She glanced at Caleb, who was now fiddling with his backpack's zipper, his small face curious but confused. She said, "Let's move to the cafe over there." She nodded toward a quieter corner. "He can sit close, but we need to talk." Ethan nodded, following as Amara guided Caleb to a nearby table, handing him a juice box and a coloring book. "Stay here, buddy," she said, her voice soft but firm. Caleb obeyed, his green eyes flicking to Ethan with wonder and uncertainty. At the adjacent table, Amara sat, her posture rigid, her coffee untouched. Ethan sat across from her, his tailored jacket feeling out of place in the casual setting. "Why, Amara?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with hurt. 7 years. I had a right to know. Amara's fingers clenched around her cup, her honey-brown eyes meeting his with a fire he remembered from their college days. "A right?" she said, her voice low but fierce. "You were always gone, Ethan. Meetings, deals, big dreams. I told you I was struggling and needed you, but you were in New York, London, wherever. When I learned about Caleb, I was alone, scraping by in a one-bedroom apartment. I tried calling you once. Your assistant said you were unavailable. I wasn't going to beg." Ethan's chest tightened, memories of their last year together flooding back. Her late-night study sessions, his missed promises, the fight when he'd chosen a client pitch over her law school event. "I didn't know," he said, his voice softer, guilt creeping in. "If I'd known, would it have changed anything?" Amara cut in, her eyes searching his. "You were building Carter Industries, Ethan. I saw you later in magazines. Tech's rising star. I was terrified you'd see Caleb as a problem to solve or try to control him with your money and lawyers. I chose to protect and give him a life where he was loved, not leveraged." Her voice wavered, betraying the weight of her choice. Ethan leaned back, his hands clasped tightly, processing her words. Caleb was coloring a spaceship in the following table, humming softly, oblivious to the storm between them. "What was it like?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Raising him alone? Amara's gaze softened, drifting to Caleb. Hard, she said, her voice thick. I worked nights at a coffee shop and studied for my teaching certification during naps. My brother, Marcus, helped when he could, taking Caleb to the park and fixing his toys. But it was mostly us. Caleb's first word was ball. His first steps were chasing a puppy in our tiny living room. He's so smart, Ethan. Loves building Legos, asks questions I can't always answer. But every day, I wondered if I'd done right by keeping you away. The guilt never left. Ethan followed her gaze to Caleb, whose spaceship drawing now had green-eyed stick figures. He's incredible, he said, his voice rough with awe. You've done everything for him. The sincerity disarmed her, and for a moment, her guard slipped. He's not yours to step into, Amara said, her tone firm but less sharp. He's got feelings, fears. If you want to be his dad, it's about showing up today and every day. She glanced at Caleb, who looked up and waved, his smile shy but warm. He called you dad because he feels it. Don't break that. I won't, Ethan said, his green eyes fierce with resolve. I don't know how to do this, but I want to be in his life. In yours, if you'll let me. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Amara's throat tightened, torn between hope and caution. She said tomorrow, standing in Lincoln Park at 3:00 p.m., Springfield. We'll talk more. But Ethan, if you hurt him, I'll protect him, no matter what. She gathered Caleb's things, her movements brisk. Caleb, time to go, buddy. Caleb hopped up, clutching his drawing. See you tomorrow, Ethan? He asked, his green eyes hopeful. Ethan nodded, forcing a smile. Promise, buddy. As Amara and Caleb walked toward their gate, Ethan watched, the drawing in his pocket a lifeline to a future he was determined to earn. Amara Johnson sat rigid at the airport cafe table, her untouched coffee cooling as she watched Caleb sip his juice box, his small hands clutching a napkin where he'd sketched a wobbly castle. The hum of travelers, shuffling bags, hurried farewells, faded against the storm in her chest. Ethan Carter's presence across from her, his green eyes sharp with questions, felt like a fracture in the life she'd built. Caleb's dad had shattered her carefully guarded secret, and now Ethan demanded answers she'd buried for 7 years. Her fingers, hidden beneath the table, twisted together, anchoring her against the urge to flee. Amara, why didn't you tell me? Ethan's voice was low, insistent, cutting through the cafe's din. 7 years, and I had a son. How could you keep that from me? His tone held hurt, not anger, but it stung all the same, a reminder of her choice. She glanced at Caleb, ensuring he was absorbed in his sketch, before meeting Ethan's gaze. You don't get to walk in and judge me, Ethan, she said, her voice steady but edged with pain. You weren't there. You have no idea what I went through. Her honey brown eyes held his, daring him to push, but beneath her defiance, fear churned. Fear of reopening wounds, of losing the stability she'd fought for. Then make me understand, Ethan said, leaning forward, his tailored jacket creasing slightly. I deserve that much. Amara exhaled, her breath trembling. She'd imagined this moment countless times, rehearsing words that now felt inadequate. When I left you, she began, her voice soft, I was drowning. Law school was brutal, and you were gone. Always on a call, a trip, chasing the next deal. I told you I needed you, begged you to show up for me, but you chose a client over my graduation. The memory burned, sharp and raw. I felt invisible, Ethan. When I found out I was pregnant, I was alone in a cramped apartment, scraping by on student loans. I called you once and left a voicemail. You never called back. Ethan's jaw tightened, guilt flickering in his eyes. I didn't know, he said, his voice low. I was so caught up. You were building Carter Industries, Amara interrupted, her tone bitter but quiet. I get it. But I was terrified. I pictured telling you, and you either dismissing us as a distraction or showing up with lawyers, demanding control. Caleb was mine, my heart, my responsibility. I couldn't risk him being a pawn in your world. She glanced at Caleb, his pencil moving with focus, and her voice softened. So I chose him. I chose a life where he'd be safe, loved, and not a complication. Ethan leaned back, his hands clasped tightly, processing her words. You thought I'd take him from you? He asked, his voice a mix of offense and sorrow. Amara, I would never. Wouldn't you? She countered, her eyes narrowing. You were relentless, Ethan. I saw your name in headlines later. Tech's Titan, crushing rivals, buying out anyone in your way. I was a single mom, working nights at a diner, tutoring on weekends, barely sleeping. My brother, Marcus, helped, but Caleb and I were against the world. I couldn't let you disrupt that, not when I didn't know if you'd even care. Her voice cracked, betraying the weight of those years. Ethan's gaze dropped, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. What was it like? He asked, his voice softer, almost hesitant. Raising him alone? The question pierced her defenses, and she looked at Caleb, her heart swelling with fierce love. Exhausting, she admitted, her voice thick. I worked doubles to afford daycare and studied for my teaching exams while he napped. Marcus would take him to the park so I could breathe. But Caleb, he was my light. His first word was, Mama. His laugh could fix anything. He'd build Lego towers on our tiny kitchen table, telling stories about knights and spaceships. He's so curious, Ethan. Asks why the sky's blue, loves math, but hates spelling. She smiled faintly, then hardened. Every day, I wondered if I'd robbed him of you. The guilt ate at me, but I kept going for him. Ethan followed her gaze to Caleb, who was now stacking his crackers beside his sketch, humming softly. You did an incredible job, he said, his voice sincere. He's everything. The words carried a weight that disarmed her, a glimpse of the man she'd once loved. He's not just yours to claim, Amara said, her tone firm but less sharp. He's a person with dreams and fears. If you want to be in his life, it's not about rights. It's about showing up and being steady. She paused, her eyes searching his. Can you do that, Ethan? Or will your phone ring and you'll disappear again? I'm here now, he said, his green eyes steady. I don't know how to be a dad, but I want to learn. For him, for you. The last words hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Amara's throat tightened, torn between hope and fear. She wanted to believe him, but the Ethan she'd known lived for his empire, not for bedtime stories. Tomorrow, she said, standing, her voice resolute. Lincoln Park, 3:00 p.m. We'll talk more. But Ethan, if you hurt him, I'll do whatever it takes to protect him. She gathered Caleb's things, her movements brisk. Caleb, let's go. Our flight's soon. Caleb hopped up, clutching his napkin sketch. He said, Bye, Ethan. Then hesitated, his green eyes hopeful. See you tomorrow? Ethan nodded, a smile breaking through. Count on it, buddy. As Amara took Caleb's hand, leading him toward their gate, she felt Ethan's gaze on her, a weight she couldn't shake. The past had collided with her present, and the future was a question she wasn't ready to answer. Caleb Johnson sat cross-legged at the small cafe table, his juice box half empty and his napkin covered in a messy sketch of a cracker castle. The Chicago airport buzzed around him, but his world was narrower, focused on the man with green eyes like his own, sitting with his mom a few feet away. Caleb didn't understand everything they were saying, their voices low and serious, but he caught enough. The man, Ethan, was someone important, someone who might be his dad. The thought made Caleb's stomach flutter, like when he rode his bike down the big hill near home and didn't know if he'd crash or soar. He peeked at Ethan, trying not to stare. Ethan was tall, with dark hair and a fancy suit, like the men in the superhero movies Caleb loved. But he didn't look like a hero. Not yet. He looked confused, maybe a little sad. Caleb's mom, Amara, kept glancing at him, her face tight, like when she worried about bills, or when Caleb forgot his math homework. Caleb didn't like seeing her like that. He wanted to make her smile and learn about this man. He'd asked about his dad his whole life, and Mom always said he was busy doing important things. Caleb had imagined a pilot, or maybe a spy, off saving the world. But Ethan didn't look like a spy. He looked like someone who belonged here, with them. "Mom, can I come over now?" Caleb called, his voice cutting through the hum of the cafe. Amara turned, her honey brown eyes softening. She said, "Just a minute, buddy." Her smile forced but warm. "Finish your picture." Caleb nodded, but he kept watching. Ethan was looking at him too, and when their eyes met, Caleb felt a spark. Something familiar, like recognizing a face in a dream. He waved shyly, and Ethan waved back, a small smile breaking through his serious face. It made Caleb's heart beat faster. Maybe this was what having a dad felt like. He returned to his sketch, adding a stick figure next to the cracker castle, a man with green eyes, like the ones in his mirror every morning. Caleb had always noticed he looked different from Mom, whose eyes were brown and whose smile was wide and easy. At school, kids like Jamie had dads who came to games, built tree houses, or just sat at dinner. Caleb had his mom, Uncle Marcus, and Grandma, but no dad. Sometimes, he'd lie in bed at night wondering what his dad was doing. Was he fighting bad guys? Exploring jungles? Now, here was Ethan, and Caleb asked if he'd been waiting for him all along. "Mom says you're busy," Caleb said suddenly, standing and walking to their table before Amara could stop him. "Are you a hero? Like in the movies?" Amara's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips, and Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Caleb stood firm, his small hands clutching the napkin drawing, his green eyes wide with hope and a flicker of doubt. Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table, meeting Caleb's gaze. "Not a hero," he said, his voice gentle but rough, like he wasn't used to talking to kids. "Just a guy who works a lot, a guy who works. But I'd like to get to know you, Caleb, if that's okay." His words were careful, like he was stepping onto thin ice. Caleb tilted his head, studying him. "You look like me," he said, pointing to his own eyes. "Mom says my eyes are special. Are yours special too?" He didn't know why he asked, but it felt important, like a test. Ethan's smile grew, though it wobbled a bit. "They are," he said. "We could get them from the same place." Caleb grinned, liking the idea of sharing something with this man. But then he remembered Jamie, whose dad promised to return after a trip, but didn't. Caleb's smile faded. "Are you going to go away again?" he asked, his voice smaller now. "Like, forever?" Amara's hand reached for his, squeezing gently. "Caleb, honey, let's not," she started, but Ethan raised a hand, stopping her. No, it's a fair question, Ethan said, his eyes locked on Caleb's. I'm not going anywhere forever. I'm coming to Springfield tomorrow, like your mom said. I want to see you again. Is that okay with you? Caleb nodded slowly, his heart doing that fluttery thing again. Okay, he said, then held up his napkin. This is you, I think, with my mom. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, a woman with a braid, a boy with a backpack, and a man with green eyes next to a castle. Ethan stared at it, his expression softening, like he'd been handed something precious. That's a great drawing, Ethan said, his voice thick. Can I keep it? Caleb hesitated, then nodded, proud but shy. Amara watched, her face a mix of worry and something softer, like she was seeing something new in Ethan. Caleb, why don't you grab your backpack? Amara said, her tone gentle but firm. We need to get to our gate soon. Caleb obeyed, but as he stuffed his crackers into his bag, he kept stealing glances at Ethan. He wanted to ask more. Did Ethan like Legos? Did he know how to ride a bike? But Mom's face said it wasn't time yet. As Amara stood, gathering their things, Ethan spoke quietly. Amara, thank you for letting me talk to him. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Tomorrow, Ethan, Lincoln Park. Please don't make him hope for something you can't give. I won't, Ethan promised, standing as well. Caleb took his mom's hand but turned back to Ethan one last time. See you tomorrow, mister, he said, then added, testing the word, maybe Dad? It felt big, scary, but right. Ethan's breath caught, and he knelt to Caleb's level. I want that, buddy, he said, his voice soft. Let's figure it out together. Caleb grinned, the doubt in his chest easing just a little. As he and Amara walked toward their gate, Caleb clutched his juice box, his mind buzzing with possibilities. Maybe Ethan wasn't a spy or a pilot, but he was here, and that was enough for now. Amara glanced down at him, her smile tight but warm. You okay, buddy? She asked, squeezing his hand. Yeah, Caleb said, looking back one last time. Ethan was still standing by the cafe, watching them, the napkin drawing in his hand. Caleb waved, and Ethan waved back, a promise in the gesture. For the first time, Caleb felt like his dad wasn't just a story. He was real, and maybe he'd stay. The Chicago Airport Cafe was a blur of clinking mugs and murmured conversations. But for Ethan Carter, the world had narrowed to the table where he sat with Amara Johnson and the small boy who'd called him Dad. Now back at his table, Caleb was engrossed in a new napkin sketch, his green eyes bright with focus. Ethan clutched the earlier drawing Caleb had given him, a stick figure family with a castle, its creases already softening from his grip. Amara's words from moments ago lingered. If you hurt him, I'll protect him, no matter what. Her honey-brown eyes held a fierce resolve, but beneath it, Ethan saw a flicker of exhaustion, a mother carrying the weight of 7 years alone. Ethan said, I won't hurt him, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Or you, Amara, but I need to be part of this. Please tell me how we do that. His usual boardroom confidence felt out of place here, replaced by a raw need to connect with the son he'd just discovered. Amara leaned back, her arms crossed, studying him as if searching for the man she'd once known. It's not that simple, Ethan, she said, her tone softer but firm. Caleb's life is stable, school, friends, and my brother Marcus checking in. You showing up changes everything. He's already asking questions I don't know how to answer. She glanced at Caleb, who was adding spiky turrets to his drawing, oblivious to their tension. We can't just rewrite his world because you're here now. Ethan nodded, swallowing the urge to argue. I get that. But he knows I'm his father. He said it himself. I can't walk away from that. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You said tomorrow, Lincoln Park, 3 p.m. I'll be there. But what's the plan? How do we make this work for him? Amara's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if his willingness to listen was a small concession. We take it slow, she said. You meet us in Springfield. Spend some time with Caleb and see his life. But no promises you can't keep, Ethan. No big gestures that disappear when your phone rings. Her eyes flicked to the phone on the table, silent but looming, a reminder of the empire that defined him. Fair, Ethan said, though the weight of her distrust settled heavily. But I need to know you're not shutting me out. He's my son too. The words felt strange, new, but undeniable. He glanced at Caleb, whose innocent wave earlier had cracked something open in him, a longing he hadn't known he could feel. Amara replied, I'm not shutting you out, her voice quieter now, but I'm protecting him. You've got to earn his trust, and mine. She hesitated, then added, We would visit Marcus in Springfield for a week. You can come there and meet us at the park. It's public, neutral. Caleb will feel safe. She pulled a receipt from her purse, scribbling the address again, as if to cement the plan. Don't be late. I won't, Ethan said, taking the receipt, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting moment. The contact sent a jolt through him, a reminder of a time when her touch was familiar. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on Caleb, who was now humming a tune, his pencil dancing across the napkin. What does he like to do? Ethan asked, hungry for any detail. You said he builds things. Amara's face softened, a faint smile breaking through. Lego sets, mostly. He makes entire cities, castles, spaceships, you name it. He's got this imagination that runs wild. Loves books too, especially adventure stories. And he's good at math, but don't ask him to spell. She laughed. A slight, genuine sound caught Ethan off guard, stirring memories of their college days. He sounds incredible, Ethan said, his voice thick. I want to know all of it, Amara. Everything I've missed. Her smile faded, replaced by a guarded look. You've missed a lot, she said, not unkindly. But you can't just catch up in a day. It's going to take time. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Caleb, time to go, buddy. We've got a plane to catch. Caleb hopped up, clutching his napkin and backpack. Okay, Mom. He glanced at Ethan, his green eyes curious but cautious. You're coming to Springfield. You promised. The word promised carried a weight that made Ethan's chest tighten. Ethan said, I'll be there, buddy, forcing a smile to mask the uncertainty. Caleb grinned, then ran to Amara, slipping his hand into hers. As they turned to leave, Ethan's phone buzzed insistently, Lauren no doubt, with updates on the Tokyo merger. He silenced it, his focus still on the retreating figures of his son and the woman he'd once loved. But the buzz persisted, a reminder of the world waiting to pull him back. Ethan paced the sleek, impersonal suite at his hotel, the city skyline glittering beyond the window. The napkin drawing lay on the desk, Caleb's stick-figure family staring up at him. He'd canceled his Tokyo flight, a decision that had shocked Lauren. She'd said, Mr. Carter, the merger's critical, her voice tight with disbelief. The board's expecting you. Reschedule it, Ethan had told her, his tone final. I'm staying in Chicago tonight, then heading to Springfield. Lauren's silence spoke volumes, but Ethan didn't care. For the first time in years, something mattered more than Carter Industries. He sank into a chair, replaying the cafe conversation. Amara's words, her fear, her protectiveness, had painted a picture of a life he'd been absent from, not by choice, but by her decision. It stung, but he couldn't deny her reasoning. He'd been consumed by ambition, blind to her needs. Now, he had a chance to make it right, but the path was unclear. His phone buzzed again, and a text from his CFO, Alan, said, "The Tokyo team was panicking. Need you on a call ASAP." Ethan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. A week ago, he'd have been on that call in seconds, strategizing, dominating. Now, he typed a curt reply. "Handle it. I'm unavailable." He hit send, the act feeling like a small rebellion against his old self. He didn't know what being a father meant, but he knew he couldn't let Caleb down, not like he'd let Amara down all those years ago. Ethan picked up the napkin drawing, tracing the stick figure with green eyes. Caleb's hope, so fragile yet fierce, was a lifeline he hadn't expected. Tomorrow, in Springfield, he'd take the first step. He'd show up, just as he'd promised. But as he lay in bed, sleep elusive, he wondered if he could live up to the title Caleb had given him. "Dad," he whispered to the dark, testing the word. It felt heavy, daunting, and like a challenge he was ready to meet. The sun hung high over Lincoln Park in Springfield, casting dappled shadows through the oak trees. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of the playground, a small Lego spaceship set tucked under his arm, his tailored jacket swapped for a simple button-down to blend into the casual Saturday crowd. Children's laughter and the creak of swings filled the air, but Ethan focused on the sandbox where Caleb knelt, his green eyes narrowed in concentration as he molded a lumpy structure from damp sand. Amara sat on a nearby bench, her honey-brown eyes tracking her son, though they flicked to Ethan as he approached, her expression a mix of caution and curiosity. "Caleb, look who's here," Amara called, her voice light but laced with an edge. Caleb's head snapped up, and a grin broke across his face, bright as the afternoon sun. "Ethan!" he shouted, scrambling to his feet, sand dusting his jeans. He ran over, stopping just short of Ethan, suddenly shy. "You came." "Promised I would," Ethan said, crouching to Caleb's level, his own green eyes softening. He held out the Lego set. "You might like this. Your mom said you're into building stuff." Caleb's eyes widened, his hands reaching for the box, then hesitating as he glanced at Amara. "It's okay, buddy," she said, nodding, though her lips pressed into a thin line. "Say thank you." "Thanks," Caleb beamed, clutching the box like a treasure. "It's a spaceship. Can we build it now?" Ethan glanced at Amara, seeking permission. She slightly nodded, but her posture remained guarded, arms crossed as she watched them head to the sandbox. Caleb plopped down, tearing into the Lego box enthusiastically, his small fingers sorting pieces with practiced ease. He declared that, "I'm going to make it fly to Mars," snapping a wing onto the base. Ethan sat beside him, the sand gritty under his knees, feeling out of place yet anchored by Caleb's excitement. "Mars, huh?" Ethan said, picking up a piece. "What's on Mars?" "Aliens," Caleb said, his voice bubbling with imagination. "Green ones, with 3 eyes. They have a secret base, but my ship will find it." He handed Ethan a handful of blocks. "You build the engine. It's got to be super fast." Ethan chuckled, the sound surprising him. "All right, boss. Please show me how." They built for the next half hour. Caleb narrated an epic space battle while Ethan followed his lead, snapping pieces together under the boy's direction. The spaceship took shape, lopsided but proud, and Ethan felt a warmth he hadn't known in years, not since college, when he and Amara would spend lazy Sundays dreaming up futures that never came. Caleb's chatter, his unguarded joy, cracked open a part of Ethan he'd long buried. Amara watched from the bench, her expression softening as Caleb laughed, but her eyes held a wariness Ethan couldn't ignore. When Caleb ran to fetch a stick for laser cannons, she approached, her voice low. You can't buy his love, Ethan, she said, nodding at the Lego set. This isn't a deal you can close with gifts. Ethan stood, brushing sand from his hands, meeting her gaze. He said, I'm not trying to buy anything, his tone earnest. I want to know him, Amara. To be part of his world, even a little. He paused, glancing at Caleb, stabbing the sand with his stick. He's incredible. You've done that, all on your own. Amara's shoulders eased, but her skepticism lingered. He is incredible, she agreed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But he's sensitive, Ethan. He notices things. When I'm stressed, when people don't show up. If you're in, you have to be in for real. No halfway. I'm in, Ethan said, the words coming faster than he expected. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to learn for him. He hesitated, then added, and for you, if you'll let me. Amara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned to watch Caleb, who was now back with his stick, waving it like a sword. Look, Ethan, it's a laser, Caleb called, grinning. Ethan laughed, the sound genuine, and rejoined him in the sandbox, helping attach the cannon to their ship. Amara sat closer now, her presence a quiet anchor, as Caleb's story grew wilder, aliens battling across galaxies. Amara shared snippets of Caleb's life as the sun dipped lower, her voice softening with each detail. She said he loves math, but'll spend hours avoiding spelling. He's got this thing about storms, hides under his blanket when it thunders, and he's always building, whether it's Legos or stories. Ethan listened, hungry for every word, the weight of 7 missed years settling in his chest. What's his favorite book? He asked, wanting to hold on to every piece of his son. The Hobbit, Amara said, a smile flickering. He wants to be Bilbo, off on an adventure. Ethan nodded, storing the details, already picturing reading them with Caleb. The thought felt foreign but right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Caleb, tiring of the spaceship, tugged Ethan's sleeve. Can we swing now? He asked, pointing to the playground. Ethan glanced at Amara, who nodded, her expression still cautious, but less rigid. They moved to the swings, Caleb clambering onto one, while Ethan pushed gently, his hands steady on the chains. Higher! Caleb squealed, his laughter ringing out, and Ethan pushed harder, feeling a joy so simple it startled him. Amara's phone buzzed as they played, and she stepped away to answer, her voice low but warm. Hey, Marcus. Yeah, we're at the park. Ethan caught the name. Her brother, the uncle who'd been there for Caleb. A pang of gratitude and envy hit him. But he focused on Caleb, now chanting, To Mars, to Mars, with each swing. When Amara returned, she watched them momentarily, her expression unreadable. Marcus says hi, she added. He's protective of Caleb, wants to know what your intentions are. The question hung between them, a test. I want to be his dad, Ethan said, slowing the swing. Whatever it takes. Caleb hopped off, running to chase a butterfly, leaving them in a charged silence. Amara studied him, then nodded. Okay. But it's day by day, Ethan, for Caleb's sake. Day by day, Ethan agreed, his eyes on Caleb, who was now crouching by a flower bed, marveling at the butterfly. The park's noise faded, and Ethan felt anchored for a moment, not by deals or deadlines, but by a small boy and a fragile truce that might grow into something more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Lincoln Park, the Springfield air warm with the hum of cicadas. Ethan Carter sat on a weathered bench, the sandbox where he and Caleb had built a Lego spaceship, which was now empty, as the boy chased a butterfly nearby. Amara Johnson sat beside him, her honey-brown eyes fixed on her son, though her posture, arms crossed, shoulders tense, betrayed the weight of their unfinished conversation. Caleb's laughter echoed, a bright counterpoint to the heavy silence between the adults. Ethan's green eyes traced the boy's movements, his heart still buoyant from their play, but Amara's warning from earlier lingered. No promises you can't keep. He knew this moment, alone with her, was his chance to confront the past that loomed between them. "Why didn't you tell me later?" Ethan asked, his voice low, careful not to carry to Caleb. "After you left, things settled. You could have reached out." The question had burned in him since the airport, fueled by the sting of 7 years lost with his son. Amara's gaze flicked to him, sharp and guarded. "You think I didn't consider it?" she said, her tone edged with old pain. "I read about you, Ethan. Tech titan. Relentless innovator. Every article painted you as this unstoppable force, buying companies, breaking competitors. You were everywhere, but not the man I'd known." She paused, her fingers twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. "I was scared, okay? Not just of you rejecting Caleb, but of what you'd do if you wanted him. You always got what you wanted, Ethan. I couldn't risk him becoming another acquisition." Her words cut, not because they were cruel, but because they held truth. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. "I was that man," he admitted, his voice rough. "Back then, I thought success was everything. I missed your graduation, Amara. I chose a deal over you, over us. I told you it was for our future, but I was wrong. It was for me." The confession felt like shedding armor, exposing a wound he'd ignored for years. "I'm sorry. I should have been there." Amara's eyes widened, surprise softening her defenses. "You've never said that before," she murmured, her voice catching. "Not even when I left." She looked away, watching Caleb crouch by a flower bed, his small hands cupping a ladybug. "I was hurt, Ethan. Angry. When I found out I was pregnant, I felt so alone. I wrote you a letter once, you know. I poured my heart out, told you about Caleb, and begged you to care. But I tore it up. I couldn't trust you to put him first." Ethan's chest tightened, imagining that unsent letter, the weight of her solitude. "I would have tried," he said, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "I mayn't have been good at it, but I would have tried." He met her gaze, his green eyes earnest. "I'm here now, Amara. I want to make it right. For Caleb. For you." She shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "It's not that easy. You don't just get to step in and fix everything. Caleb's my world. I've built a life for him. School, friends, my brother Marcus stepping in when I needed help. You're showing up. It's like pulling a thread that could unravel everything." Her voice wavered, and she pressed her hands together, steadying herself. "I kept him from you, and I carry that guilt every day. But I did it to protect him, to give him a life where he's loved, not a bargaining chip." Ethan nodded, absorbing her words. "I don't want to take him from you," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I want to be his dad, not some corporate overlord. I know I messed up with you, Amara. I put work first, and I lost you because of it. But I'm not that guy anymore. Or at least, I'm trying not to be." He paused, glancing at Caleb, who was now waving the ladybug at them, his grin wide. "He's worth it. You both are." Amara's expression softened, but doubt lingered in her eyes. "You say that now," she said, "but your world is boardrooms, Ethan. Deals worth millions. Can you walk away from that for a kid who needs bedtime stories and soccer games? She leaned closer, her voice low. I want to believe you, but I've seen you choose work over everything else. What's changed? Ethan exhaled, the question piercing. Finding out I have a son, he said. Seeing him, hearing him call me dad, it's like waking up. I've spent years chasing things that don't matter as much as I thought. I don't want to miss any more of his life. He reached into his pocket, pulling out Caleb's napkin drawing from the airport, its stick figures creased but cherished. This matters more than any merger. Amara stared at the drawing, her eyes glistening. You kept that, she said, almost to herself. She looked at Caleb, then back at Ethan, her guard cracking. I messed up too, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I should have trusted you enough to tell you, even years later. But I was scared of losing him, of disrupting the life we'd built. I thought you'd moved on, that you didn't need us. I never moved on, Ethan said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Not really. I buried myself in work because it was easier than facing what I lost with you. The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded, and for a moment, the park's noise faded, leaving only the truth. Amara swallowed, her eyes searching his. We can't undo the past, she said finally. But for Caleb's sake, we can try to move forward. Slowly. You show up, be there, and we'll figure it out. But if you hurt him, Ethan... I won't, he interrupted, his voice fierce with conviction. I promise. Caleb's shout broke the moment, calling them to see his ladybug. They stood, the tension easing as they walked toward him, side by side but not touching. Look, Caleb said, holding his hands, the ladybug crawling across his fingers. It's my friend now. Ethan knelt, grinning. That's a cool friend, buddy. Amara smiled, her expression lighter, and for a fleeting moment, they felt like a unit, bound by Caleb's joy. As the sun dipped lower, Ethan knew this was just a start, a fragile bridge over a chasm of mistakes, but it was enough to keep him moving forward. The Springfield sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in amber and pink as Ethan Carter followed Amara Johnson and Caleb to their modest two-story home. The air carried the scent of freshly cut grass, and the quiet street hummed with the soft rhythm of suburban life. Ethan's green eyes scanned the house, blue shutters, a tidy garden, a child's bicycle tipped over in the driveway, and felt a pang of something unfamiliar, longing for a life he'd never known. Caleb bounded ahead, clutching the Lego spaceship they'd built at the park, his green eyes excitedly bright. Come on, Ethan, he called, waving him toward the front door. Amara glanced back, her honey-brown eyes cautious, but softened by their earlier conversation, a fragile truce forged in the park. Inside, the house was warm and lived in, with colorful drawings pinned to the fridge and books stacked on a coffee table. Caleb tugged Ethan's sleeve, pulling him toward the stairs. You gotta see my room, he said, his voice bubbling. Amara hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead, but lunch is in 10 minutes, she said, her tone motherly, but laced with a warning glance at Ethan. He understood. This was her domain, and he was a guest, not yet family. Caleb's room was a vibrant chaos of childhood, a twin bed with a space-themed comforter, Lego creations lining a shelf, and posters of dinosaurs and starships on the walls. This is my city, Caleb said, pointing to a sprawling Lego metropolis on the floor. That's the castle, and that's the rocket base. Ethan knelt, marveling at the detail, his tailored shirt creasing as he leaned closer. This is amazing, buddy, he said, genuinely impressed. You're a master builder. Caleb beamed, then pointed to a framed drawing above his desk. A stick-figure family, a woman with a braid, a boy, and a man with a blank face. "That's us," Caleb said, his voice quieter. "Mom, me, and I didn't know what you looked like before." Ethan's throat tightened, the drawing a mirror to the one Caleb had given him at the airport. "Can I draw a new one now?" Caleb asked, his eyes searching Ethan's. "With your face." "I'd love that," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. Caleb grabbed a pencil and paper, sketching with focus, while Ethan watched, feeling the weight of years he'd missed. This room, this boy, was a world he wanted to belong to, but the path felt fragile, lined with Amara's doubts and untested promises. Downstairs, Amara called, "And lunch is ready?" The small dining table was set with homemade tacos, warm tortillas, seasoned beef, and fresh salsa, inviting but straightforward. Caleb slid into his chair, chattering about his Lego city, while Ethan sat across from Amara, their eyes meeting briefly. "Nothing fancy," she said, a touch self-conscious, pushing a bowl of guacamole toward him. "Caleb's favorite." "Looks perfect," Ethan said, meaning it. The meal felt like a snapshot of a life he hadn't known he wanted, a stark contrast to the sterile boardroom lunches he was used to. Caleb dominated the conversation, recounting a school story about a dodgeball game, his hands waving as salsa dripped onto his plate. Amara laughed, wiping his chin, and Ethan caught the easy rapport between them, a bond forged through years of shared moments. He felt a twinge of envy, followed by gratitude that Caleb had her, unwavering and devoted. "Mom, tell Ethan about the time I got stuck on the slide," Caleb said, grinning. Amara shook her head, her smile warm. "You were 5 and thought you could climb the slide backward. The fire department had to come." Caleb giggled, and Ethan chuckled, picturing it. He said that sounds like quite the adventure, earning a nod from Caleb. Amara's phone buzzed as they ate, and she glanced at the screen. "It's Marcus," she said, stepping into the living room to answer. Ethan caught fragments of her conversation, warm, familiar, mentioning Caleb's day at the park. Marcus, her brother, was a presence in Caleb's life, a male figure who'd stepped in where Ethan hadn't. The thought stirred a mix of appreciation and jealousy, but Ethan pushed it aside, focusing on Caleb, who was now building a taco tower with his tortilla chips. When Amara returned, she set her phone down, her expression neutral, but her eyes flicking to Ethan. "Marcus is coming by tomorrow," she said. "He's been like an uncle to Caleb, always there for soccer games or fixing his bike. He's curious about you." The subtext was clear. Marcus was protective, another layer of scrutiny Ethan would face. "Good," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "I want to meet him. Anyone who's been there for Caleb is someone I want to know." Amara nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes, but the moment was brief, interrupted by Caleb's enthusiastic, "Can Ethan come to my soccer game next week?" "Please, Mom." Amara hesitated, her fork pausing midair. "We'll see," she said, her tone careful. "Ethan's got a busy life, Caleb." The words were gentle, but carried a challenge directed at Ethan. He felt the weight of her doubt, whether he could truly prioritize Caleb over his empire. "I can make it," Ethan said, his voice firm, holding her gaze. "I want to be there." Caleb grinned, oblivious to the undercurrent, and launched into a description of his team's last game. Ethan listened, nodding, but his mind lingered on Amara's skepticism. The tacos, the laughter, the cluttered warmth of the house. It felt like a family, fleeting and fragile, but real. Yet the outside world loomed, a reminder of the life he'd built, waiting to pull him back. As they cleared the plates, Caleb tugged Ethan's hand. Want to see my backyard? There's a treehouse Uncle Marcus built. Ethan glanced at Amara, who nodded, a small smile on her lips. Go on, she said. I'll clean up. Outside, Caleb scrambled up a wooden ladder to a sturdy treehouse, its walls painted with stars. Ethan followed, squeezing into the small space, his head brushing the ceiling. This is my hideout, Caleb said proudly. My uncle and I made it last summer. It's incredible, Ethan said, his heart swelling at Caleb's openness. For a moment, they sat in the treehouse, Caleb pointing out the neighborhood through a tiny window, and Ethan felt a sense of belonging, however temporary. But Amara's words echoed, no promises you can't keep. This moment was a gift, but earning a permanent place in Caleb's world would take more than a single afternoon. The Springfield afternoon was fading into a golden dusk, the modest kitchen of Amara Johnson's home filled with the clatter of dishes and Caleb's animated chatter about his treehouse adventures. Ethan Carter sat at the small dining table, his green eyes following his son's enthusiastic gestures, a half-eaten taco still on his plate. The domestic warmth, Amara's quiet efficiency at the sink, Caleb's laughter, was a world apart from the sleek boardrooms Ethan was used to, and it stirred a longing he was only beginning to understand. Amara's honey-brown eyes met his briefly, a flicker of warmth tempered by caution, their fragile truce from the park holding, but untested. Caleb, oblivious to the undercurrent, tugged Ethan's sleeve. Can you come to my soccer game next week? He asked again, his green eyes bright with hope. Uncle Marcus says I'm the best kicker, but I want you to see. Ethan smiled, his heart swelling at the boy's eagerness. He said, I'll be there, buddy. His voice firm, though Amara's earlier warning, no promises you can't keep, echoed in his mind. Amara dried her hands on a dish towel, her expression neutral, but her gaze sharp. She said soccer's a big deal for him, sitting across from Ethan. Please don't say yes unless you mean it. The challenge in her tone was clear, a reminder of the life Ethan had built, one where deals and deadlines always came first. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with Lauren's name, his assistant, relentless as ever. Ethan hesitated, then silenced it, but the vibration lingered, a pull from the world he'd left behind. I mean it, he said to Amara, holding her gaze. I'm here for him. Caleb grinned, piling more chips onto his plate, but Amara's nod was curt, her trust still a work in progress. The moment broke as Caleb launched into a story about a school science project, his hands waving as he described a volcano made of clay. Ethan listened, nodding, but his phone buzzed again, insistent. He glanced at it. Lauren, with a text. Tokyo deals unraveling. Rival bid on the supplier. Need you on a call now. Ethan's jaw tightened, the familiar adrenaline of a business crisis surging. A week ago, he'd have been halfway to the airport. Now, he typed a quick reply. Set up a remote call. I'm not leaving. He hit send, the decision grounding him. Amara noticed, her eyes narrowing slightly. Do they work? She asked, her tone light but probing. Just something Lauren can handle, Ethan said, dismissing it, though the weight of the message lingered. He turned to Caleb. Tell me about that volcano. Did it erupt? Caleb's face lit up, and he launched into a vivid retelling with sound effects. Amara watched, her expression softening, a hint of surprise in her eyes. Ethan felt a spark of hope. She was seeing him choose Caleb over work, even if just for now. As they cleared the table, Caleb ran to grab his soccer ball, insisting that Ethan see his super kick in the backyard. Amara followed, leaning against the doorframe as Caleb dribbled the ball across the grass, his laughter ringing out. He's been practicing for weeks, she said, her voice quieter now. Marcus usually takes him to games, but Caleb's been talking about you non-stop since yesterday. Ethan's chest tightened, a mix of pride and responsibility. I want to be there, he said, his voice earnest. Not just for games, but for him, for you. The words slipped out, raw and unguarded, and Amara's eyes flicked to his, searching. She didn't respond, but the silence felt less heavy, a step toward something unspoken. Caleb kicked the ball toward Ethan, who caught it awkwardly, prompting a giggle from the boy. You're not bad, Caleb said, running over, but you gotta kick it like this. He demonstrated that his small foot was sending the ball rolling. Ethan tried, his attempt clumsy but earnest, and Caleb's laughter filled the yard. Amara smiled, a genuine curve of her lips, and for a moment they were a unit, mother, son, and a father finding his place. The spell broke when Amara's phone chimed. She glanced at it, her smile fading. Marcus, she said, stepping away to answer. Ethan watched her, catching snippets of her conversation. Warm, familiar, mentioning Caleb's excitement. Marcus, the uncle who'd been Caleb's rock, was a reminder of the life Ethan was entering, one with roots and relationships he'd yet to navigate. When Amara returned, she tucked her phone away. He's coming tomorrow, she said. Wants to meet you. He's protective, Ethan. Don't expect a warm welcome. I can handle it, Ethan said, his voice steady. Anyone who loves Caleb is someone I respect. Amara nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes, but her caution remained, a wall not yet fully breached. As the sky darkened, Caleb yawned, his energy fading. Can Ethan read me a story tonight? He asked, his eyes pleading. Amara hesitated, then nodded. One story, she said, her tone firm but softer. Upstairs, Ethan sat on the edge of Caleb's bed, a worn copy of The Hobbit in hand. He read about Bilbo's adventures, his voice steadying as Caleb's eyes drooped, the boy clutching a Lego spaceship. Amara watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable but not cold. When Caleb drifted off, Ethan closed the book, lingering a moment to watch his son sleep. Downstairs, Amara waited in the living room, her arms crossed. You're serious about this, she said. Not a question, but an observation. Canceling calls, reading stories. It's not the Ethan I knew. Ethan said I'm trying to be different. His green eyes met hers. For him, and for us, if there's a chance. Amara's breath caught, but she didn't respond. Her silence a mix of hope and doubt. As Ethan left, the night air cool against his skin, he felt the weight of his choice. The Tokyo deal loomed, but Caleb's sleepy smile and Amara's softening gaze were worth more than any contract. For now, he'd chosen them, and he'd fight to keep that choice. The Springfield evening was fabulous. The sky a deepening indigo as Ethan Carter stood in Amara Johnson's cozy living room, the echo of Caleb's bedtime story still lingering. The soft glow of a lamp illuminated Amara's honey-brown eyes, which held a mix of surprise and caution after Ethan chose to prioritize their son over a business call. Caleb's sleepy request for Ethan to read The Hobbit had woven a fragile connection thread, but the weight of Amara's earlier words, "No promises you can't keep," hung heavy. Ethan's green eyes flicked to the staircase where Caleb now slept, his heart tethered to the boy in a way that made his old life feel distant. As Amara handed Ethan a mug of tea, her fingers brushing his briefly, she broke the silence. "You're trying, aren't you?" she said, her voice soft but probing. "Canceling calls, reading stories. It's not what I expected." Ethan cradled the mug, its warmth grounding him. He replied that I meant what I said at the park, meeting her gaze. "Caleb's my priority now. And you, if you'll let me." The words carried a hope he hadn't voiced before, but Amara's expression remained guarded, her trust a slow-building bridge. Before she could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed again, the screen flashing with Lauren's name. He sighed, setting the mug down. "Sorry. I need to check this." He stepped onto the porch, the night air crisp as he read her text. "Tokyo supplier deals collapsing. Rivals offering 20% more. The board demands you in NY tomorrow." Ethan's jaw clenched, the familiar pull of his empire tugging hard. A month ago, he'd have been strategizing on a jet by now. But Caleb's grin and Amara's cautious warmth anchored him to Springfield. He typed back, "I'll join remotely. Book me for a 7 a.m. call." Not leaving and hitting send felt like a declaration, a line between his past and this new path. He returned inside, where Amara watched him, her arms crossed. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone neutral, but her eyes searching. "Just work," Ethan said, dismissing it. "I'm handling it from here." Her nod was slight, but approval flickered in her gaze, a crack in her skepticism. Caleb's voice interrupted from upstairs, sleepy but urgent. "Mom? Ethan?" Amara frowned, heading up, Ethan following close behind. In Caleb's room, the boy sat up in bed, his green eyes wide, clutching his Lego spaceship. "I had a bad dream," he mumbled, his voice small. "You left, Ethan, like Jamie's dad." Amara knelt beside him, stroking his hair, but Caleb's gaze fixed on Ethan, fear raw in his expression. "Jamie's dad said he'd come back, but he didn't." "Are you gonna go away?" Ethan's heart twisted, the boy's vulnerability cutting deeper than any boardroom loss. He knelt beside Amara, his voice steady but gentle. "I'm not going anywhere, buddy," he said. "I have to go to New York for a few days. Work stuff. But I'm returning. I promise." Caleb's lip trembled, unconvinced, and Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness. Reaching into his pocket, Ethan pulled out his grandfather's pocket watch, its silver face worn but cherished, a relic from his childhood. He said, "This is special to me," placing it in Caleb's small hands. "My grandpa gave it to me when I was your age. Please keep it safe until I get back. That way, you'll know I'm coming home." Caleb's eyes widened, his fingers tracing the watch's engravings, the weight of the gesture calming his fear. "Really?" Caleb asked, clutching the watch. "You'll come back for it?" "Always," Ethan said, his voice thick. "Pinky promise." He extended his pinky, and Caleb hooked his own around it, a small smile breaking through. Amara watched, her expression softening, a tear glinting in her eye as she tucked Caleb in. "Sleep now, buddy," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Caleb nodded, the watch under his pillow, his breathing evening out. Downstairs, Amara faced Ethan, her voice low to avoid waking Caleb. "That was good," she said, her tone warm but cautious. "The watch. It means something to him. But Ethan? He's scared. Kids hear promises, and they hold on tight. Jamie's dad left a mark. He told Caleb stories about his dad disappearing after a business trip. Don't be that guy." "I won't," Ethan said, his green eyes fierce with resolve. "I know I've got a lot to prove, but I'm in this, Amara. For him. For us." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Amara's gaze softened, but she stepped back, breaking the moment. "Thank you for today," she said, her voice steady for showing up. "Let's talk when you're back from New York." She handed him his jacket, her fingers lingering a moment. "Safe travels. And Ethan, keep your promise." "I will," he said, slipping the jacket on. As he stepped into the cool night, the pocket watch's absence felt like a vow, tying him to Caleb, His phone buzzed again. Lauren confirming the call, but he ignored it, his mind on the boy upstairs and the woman who'd guarded him alone. He'd face New York tomorrow, but Springfield was where he belonged now, and he'd fight to prove it. The New York skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Carter Industries' boardroom, starkly contrasting the warm chaos of Amara Johnson's Springfield home. Ethan Carter sat at the head of the polished table, his green eyes scanning the tense faces of his executives. Still, his mind was elsewhere, on Caleb's sleepy grip on his grandfather's pocket watch, on Amara's cautious trust. The emergency meeting about a rival's bid for their key supplier, Horizon Tech, demanded his presence. Yet every fiber of him yearned to be back in Springfield. His phone, silent but heavy in his pocket, held a photo Amara had sent last night. Caleb asleep, the watch tucked under his pillow, a promise Ethan was determined to keep. Alan, his CFO, leaned forward, his voice urgent. Horizon's wavering, Ethan. Stark Enterprises offered 20% more and a board seat for their CEO's son. We need to counter 30% at least percent, or lose our supply chain edge. The room murmured in agreement, eyes on Ethan, expecting the ruthless strategist who never lost. He'd have matched the bid a month ago, outmaneuvered Stark, and claimed victory. Now, the stakes felt different. What's our contingency? Ethan asked, his tone calm but distant. Alan blinked, caught off guard. We have backup suppliers, but it'll cost us a 10% production dip for 6 months, maybe more. Ethan nodded, his gaze drifting to the window, picturing Caleb's grin as he kicked a soccer ball. And the funds for a 30% increase? He pressed. Alan hesitated. We'd need to divert from the European expansion. Delay it a year, minimum. The room tensed, and the European project was Ethan's pet for years. Ethan leaned back, his fingers tapping the table, the weight of his choice settling in. Caleb's voice echoed, "Are you gonna go away?" And Amara's warning, "Don't be that guy." "Let me make a call," Ethan said, standing and stepping into the hall. He dialed Lauren, his assistant. "If we lose Horizon, what's the real damage?" he asked. Lauren's voice was steady but concerned. "Manageable. We'd pivot to smaller suppliers, take a hit, but recover by next fiscal year. The board won't like it, though." Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see. "And the European plan?" Lauren paused. "It's your legacy, Ethan. Delaying it could shift market perception." Ethan closed his eyes, Caleb's hopeful eyes, and Amara's cautious smile flashing in his mind. His legacy wasn't in markets anymore. It was in Springfield, with a boy who needed him, and a woman he'd never stopped loving. "Thanks, Lauren," he said, ending the call. He returned to the boardroom, facing the expectant faces. "We're not countering," he said, his voice firm. "Stark can have Horizon. We'll pivot. Alan, start outreach to alternates today." The room erupted in protests, Alan's voice rising. "Ethan, this isn't you. Stark will bury us." Ethan raised a hand, silencing them. "I've spent years fighting battles like this," he said. "But some things are worth more. I trust you to handle this. I need to be elsewhere." He gathered his papers, ignoring the stunned looks, and left, the weight of his empire lifting with each step. By evening, Ethan's jet touched down in Springfield, a day earlier than planned. He drove straight to Amara's modest blue-shuttered home, glowing under streetlights. Caleb answered the door, his green eyes wide with shock. "Ethan!" he shouted, throwing his arms around Ethan's waist. "You're back early!" The boy's joy was a balm, erasing the boardroom's tension. Ethan knelt, ruffling Caleb's hair. "Couldn't stay away, buddy," he said, his voice thick. "Missed you too much." Amara appeared in the doorway, her honey brown eyes wide with surprise. "I thought you were in New York until tomorrow," she said, her tone soft but curious. Ethan stood, meeting her gaze. "Meeting wrapped early," he said, keeping it simple, not ready to admit he'd walked away from a deal worth millions. "I promised Caleb I'd be back." Caleb clutched the pocket watch, waving it proudly. "I kept it safe," he said, handing it to Ethan. "You came back, like you said." Ethan took the watch, its familiar weight grounding him, and slipped it into his pocket. "Told you I would," he said, winking. Caleb grinned, then ran inside, calling for them to see his latest Lego creation. Amara lingered in the doorway, studying Ethan. "You look different," she said, her voice tentative. "Lighter, maybe?" Ethan shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe I am." Her eyes searched his, sensing more than he was saying. "Didn't the deal go well?" she asked, stepping closer. "I walked away," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "It wasn't worth it, not compared to this." He gestured toward the house, toward Caleb's laughter echoing inside. Amara's breath caught, a flicker of belief in her eyes. "That's not the Ethan I knew," she said, but her tone held warmth, not doubt. He said, trying to be a new Ethan, his green eyes steady. "For him. For you." Amara didn't respond, but her silence felt softer, a door cracking open. "Come in," she said finally. "Caleb's been dying to show you his Lego city." As Ethan followed her inside, the warmth of the house enveloped him, a stark contrast to New York's cold ambition. He'd chosen his family and felt truly at home for the first time. The Springfield lake shimmered under the midday sun, its surface rippling with the gentle breeze, as Ethan Carter, Amara Johnson, and Caleb sat at a weathered picnic table, the remnants of sandwiches and lemonade scattered before them. Caleb's green eyes sparkled with excitement as he recounted his first fishing triumph, his small hands stretching wide to exaggerate the size of the bass he'd caught earlier with Ethan. "It was this big, Mom," he insisted, his voice bright with pride. Amara's honey-brown eyes crinkled with a smile as she ruffled his hair. "It's growing every time you tell it," she teased, her laughter mingling with the lake's soft lapping. Ethan watched them, his heart full in a way he'd never known. The morning's fishing trip, renting a small boat, Caleb's squeals as the fish tugged his line, had been a moment of pure joy, a stark contrast to the boardroom battles he'd left behind in New York. His decision to walk away from the Horizon Tech deal, choosing Caleb and Amara over ambition, had shifted something fundamental in him. Sitting here, he felt anchored, not by success, but by the family he'd found. Caleb hopped up, running to the shore to skip stones, his giggles returning to the table. Amara's gaze followed him, then turned to Ethan, her expression soft but searching. "He's happier than I've ever seen him," she said quietly. "These past weeks, having you here has changed him." She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her lemonade glass. "It's changed me too." Ethan leaned forward, his green eyes steady. "I'm glad," he said, his voice low. "I meant what I said last night, Amara. I'm here for him. For you. I'm moving to Springfield permanently." The words came easily, a decision solidified in New York's boardroom. "I've delegated most of my work to my team. Carter Industries will survive without me micromanaging. I want to be here, for soccer games, bedtime stories, everything." Amara's breath caught, her eyes widening. "You're serious," she said, not a question but a realization. "You're giving up your empire for this?" Her gesture encompassed the lake, Caleb's distant figure, and the quiet simplicity of their moment. "Not giving it up," Ethan corrected, a small smile tugging at his lips and redefining it. "My empire's right here." He nodded toward Caleb, who was now waving at them, a flat stone in hand. Amara's smile was tentative, but warmth flickered in her gaze, a crack in the wall she'd built over the years. Before she could respond, a car pulled up nearby, and a tall man with a warm grin stepped out. Marcus, Amara's brother. Caleb ran to him, shouting, "Uncle Marcus, I caught a fish!" Marcus hugged him, his eyes flicking to Ethan with curiosity and caution. "Heard you're the fishing hero," Marcus said, approaching the table. "I'm Marcus. Been looking after these two." His handshake was firm, his gaze assessing. "Ethan," he replied, meeting Marcus's scrutiny with respect. "Thanks for being there for Caleb. I'm hoping to do the same now." Marcus nodded, a hint of approval in his expression. "He's a good kid. Just make sure you stick around." The warning was clear, but his tone was fair, grounding Ethan in the broader family he was entering. As Marcus joined Caleb at the shore, teaching him to skip stones, Amara turned to Ethan, her voice low. She said, "We need to talk about us." Her eyes steady, but vulnerable. "Not just Caleb. We've got history, Ethan. Good and evil. I need to know this isn't just about being a dad, that you're not trying to fix the past with some perfect family picture." Ethan exhaled, the weight of her words settling. "It's not just about Caleb," he admitted, his voice raw. "Seeing you again and being here has brought back everything I felt for you. I was an idiot back then, Amara. I put work first and let you down. I can't undo that, but I want to try again, with you, if you're willing." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. Amara looked at their hands, then at him, her eyes glistening. "I was hurt, Ethan," she said softly, "but I wasn't blameless. I shut you out, but didn't let you get to know Caleb. I'm scared of trusting you and messing this up for him, but I want to try too." Slowly. She placed her hand in his, a tentative bridge, and Ethan's heart lifted, the contact a promise of possibility. Caleb ran back, his cheeks flushed. "Ethan." "Dad," he said, testing the word, his green eyes wide with hope. "Can I call you that now?" Ethan knelt, his throat tight, and glanced at Amara, who nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'd be honored, buddy," Ethan said, his voice thick. Caleb hugged him, small arms tight, and Ethan felt the world shift, a new center forming. Amara joined them, her hand on Caleb's shoulder, and for a moment, they were a unit, whole and hopeful. Marcus watched, nodding approvingly, then tossed a stone into the lake. "You three look good together," he said, his voice light but sincere. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the water, Caleb ran ahead, collecting more stones, calling for them to join him. Ethan and Amara walked side by side, their hands brushing, not quite holding, but close. "We'll need to keep talking," Amara said, her voice soft. "Work through the past, figure out what's next. But I believe you're here for him, for us. One day at a time," Ethan agreed, his green eyes warm. "I'm not going anywhere." As they reached Caleb, who handed Ethan a smooth stone, the boys' laughter rang out, a sound of pure joy. Ethan tossed the stone, watching it skip across the lake, and felt a contentment more profound than any deal he'd ever closed. This was his future, messy, uncertain, but undeniably his.